NBA front office insider Bobby Marks, who's here. Who do you think is the big winner from today?
Your Chicago Bulls, right up there. And I think when we look at their roster and where they were before the deadline and where they are now, I mean, when you add a player like Nikola Vucevic, starting center here, and this is why I like what Chicago was able to do. 2 All-Stars, Zach LaVine and Vucevic. They've got interchangeable players. You can put out different lineups here. You could put out Thaddeus Young, Kobe White, players like that. They got a deep bench. Garrett Temple, Denzel Valentine, Daniel Tice they just got in a trade from the Celtics. And here's the big thing. I considered the Bulls a Tier 3 team. They're one of those teams that was trying to compete in the play-in tournament. I'm putting them up there in a Tier 2 with Miami and Boston right now.
Wow.
They're 3 games out of the 4th spot. With this lineup right now, this can get them into a non-play-in type tournament, and they're set up for the future. The big thing is Zach LaVine is going to be a free agent in 2022. You got to keep him happy. You don't want him to walk right now.
Yeah, bend the knee. Do what you need to do, right? Okay, so right now we see the Bulls sitting at 1.5 games back of that 8 seed again. Still very much a candidate for the plan, but you think could be more. The Lakers. It really felt like the Lakers needed to make a move, and they did not. Do you think that we could still see a move made? Why do you think they stood pat?
Well, regarding what they had to offer, they were really restricted. And when you look at a player like Kyle Lowry, what they could have offered was Kentavious Cole-Pope and a player like Dennis Schroeder. So those are your 2 starters. Now, what else? What else would Toronto want? And it's a player like Talon Horton-Tucker. They didn't have a first-round pick to trade until 2027. The Lakers reluctant to give up one of their younger players. The big thing, too, is with Kyle Lowry. Was not extension eligible. You get him on a rental for 2 months and then you've got to pay him potentially in the offseason. And then I think when we're looking at the Lakers, it's going to be the buyout market.
Sure.
A player like Andre Drummond, who is going to be likely bought out of Cleveland, he is certainly going to be priority 1 for them, filling that center role. A player like Otto Porter, who was traded to Orlando, a big wing. They've got 2 roster spots, but
historic contract. Our favorite Cowboy, that is Marcus Spears, weighing in.
Plus, PTI is coming right back. They're going to let us know the winners and losers from today's trade deadline. We all win when Lemon Pepper Lou is back in Atlanta. Let's talk about some more deals. The Heat acquire Victor Oladipo from the Rockets in exchange for Avery Bradley, Kelly Olynyk, and a 2022 draft pick swap. It's the second time Oladipo has been traded this season. How about the Sixers? They acquire a point guard, not Kyle Lowry, but George Hill. Okay. Philadelphia is sending Tony Bradley and 2 second-round picks to OKC in a 3-team deal. Terrence Ferguson goes to the Knicks. Austin Rivers goes from New York to the Thunder. The Raptors did trade Norman Powell, sending him to Portland for Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood. Powell's one of the league's best 3-point shooters this season, sitting at a career-high 44% from deep. And finally, the Mavericks acquire J.J. Redick, Nicolo Melli from the Pelicans. Redick gives the Mavs some much-needed shooting off the bench. He'd been out of the rotation for New Orleans. And we take a look at a few other notable moves as well. Celtics acquire Mo Wagner from the Bulls in exchange for Daniel Tice. The Jazz traded a second-round pick to the Raptors for Matt Thomas. And the Heat traded Mo Harkless and Chris Silva to the Kings for Nemanja Bjelica. Let's bring in the man who essentially broke every one of those trades that we just ran down. Adrian Wojnarowski is here. Woj, possibly the surprise of the day. Kyle Lowry, 35 years old, sitting on an expiring contract, staying on a Raptors team that's 8 games under 500. Why wasn't he moved?
Al, ultimately, I think Masai Ujiri, the Raptors president, just didn't like the returns that he had out in the marketplace. Miami, Philadelphia, the Lakers, and I think for Kyle Lowry, I think there was hesitancy for teams not knowing whether he was going to be just a rental for the rest of the season or whether they could meet his expectations for a new contract after the season. I do think that limited some of the offers for Lowry. And listen, Toronto could re-sign him. They could do a sign and trade and still get value for him after the season.
So they do get rid of Norman Powell. You could look at the addition of Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood and debate whether the Raptors actually got a little bit better. Who would have thought? Let's talk about the Heat. They made a big splash. Maybe we thought this was coming, trading for Victor Oladipo, who has been very clear about his love for Miami. What's Pat Riley's approach in Miami right now?
Well, certainly the Victor Oladipo acquisition, Bjelica from the Kings, who certainly will help this Miami team And for Miami, listen, there's been a long mutual interest with Victor Oladipo, and he's spent a lot of time in Miami, and I think privately this was a place he wanted to land. And now with an expiring contract, with a significant injury in his recent past, and a player who has not been as efficient as he had been, he has not been as available because of injury in the last couple of years. Now Miami gets to get a real close look at him for the rest of this season and decide if they want to move forward with him and at what price. And a player now who's got a lot to prove and a chance to do it, certainly in one of the best organizations in the league, and a team in Miami that, with the pieces now they have together, is still going to be a tough out in the Eastern Conference playoffs.
Exactly. When you have sort of what they've got on that roster, a lot of times it's a cultural fit as to whether you make these acquisitions. They certainly think Victor Oladipo can fit in well there. Woj, stand by.
For much more, let's bring in Tim Legler. And Legs, let's run through these key moves, starting with Oladipo. What does this now mean for the Heat in the East?
Well, I think the Heat looked at the Brooklyn Nets and said, look, this is the greatest collection of scoring talent we've seen at the top of any roster. We're going to have to add firepower. And you put him alongside Jimmy Butler, that's pretty nice. You also have Tyler Hero, Goran Dragic, Bam Adebayo. That's a lot of playmakers on one team. But I think, Kevin, for me, I'm really curious to see how exactly this is going to fit with all of these perimeter pieces playing together. It's going to be a different look for Victor Oladipo. He hasn't been as good this year as he was the year he was going to be an all-star in Indiana. So let's see how that's going to work. I need to see it for a couple of weeks before I can really determine if that's going to work.
Clippers are in need of a point guard here, Legs. They bring in Rondo. Is that enough for Kawhi?
I love it because, number one, they need vocal leadership on this team. They're going to get it. They also need more brains of an operation on the floor. I think that's what Rondo brings. They have enough scoring, and that's why Lou Williams was expendable. They need a guy that makes people better, that has an uncanny knack for making key plays on both ends of the floor with all of that playoff experience. I love this pickup for the Clippers.
The Magic were selling. They're rebuilding, sending Aaron Gordon to the Nuggets. How much did Denver upgrade today?
Yeah, I mean, this is a team now I think can go toe-to-toe with anybody in the Western Conference because they already have two stars, legit stars, one an MVP candidate, Jokic. Michael Porter Jr. is that guy. He's starting to take that leap. 30 games from now, he might have arrived where he's doing it every single night as a third star. And now you add Aaron Gordon to the mix, and also defensively, what he's going to mean going up against the LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, Paul Georges of the world. Huge pickup for Denver.
Another Magic big name on the move. Vucevic to the Bulls in a 4-player trade. Impressions of what Chicago did today?
Yeah, I love it because now Vucevic is going to put up the same type of numbers, but they're not going to be as hollow because I think people are looking at Chicago now with some interest. This is the best perimeter player Vucevic has played with. This is the best big guy that Levine has played with. You're talking about two guys now that you can go ahead and put in 50 every night in the scoring column. That's going to get them relevant in the East sooner rather than later. The question is, are they there with those teams at the top? Brooklyn, Milwaukee, Philly, Miami? Probably not quite. But this certainly goes a long way in knowing they're a piece or two away from getting into that mix. So Vucevic now has got to feel like a new lease on life, getting a chance to play with Zach LaVine.
Yeah, Billy.
The deadline has passed. Woj, is your phone on fire? The man who all day, every 3 minutes, has been updating us with news after news after news, our senior insider, Adrian Wojnarowski. And Woj, the biggest story today is Toronto deciding in the end to keep Kyle Lowry. Can you pull the curtain back on that decision for us?
Yeah, you saw a buildup of deals with Toronto, trading Terrence Davis to Sacramento and Matt Thomas to Utah, and obviously the Norman Powell deal to Portland, which I thought was one of the best of the day. And it felt like a buildup to a Kyle Lowry trade. And I know Masai Ujiri was talking with teams right up until that 3 o'clock Eastern deadline. And the Lakers, Philadelphia, Miami, obviously. And, Miami pivoted. They did the Victor Oladipo deal. And I think part of it, too, in talking to people around Masai Ujiri and the Raptors and Kyle Lowry, he was always fine with finishing the season with the Raptors. And I think ultimately Ujiri didn't find a deal that was compelling enough to make the trade. And listen, he'll finish the year with the Raptors. He'll become a free agent. When you look at the direction of the franchise, it seems unlikely that he would be part of their long-term plans, and obviously Lowry at this point in his career could certainly go somewhere else and maybe be in position to win a title. But there's no question Kyle Lowry staying in Toronto was a surprise, and they went down to the wire before deciding that they weren't going to take any of the deals on the table, and he was going to stay in Toronto or stay in Tampa, which is where he'll finish the season. I was going to say, where
he will be able to play more golf for the rest of the season. This day, it never disappoints. There's always the not action is action. You mentioned the Norm Powell deal to Portland. What do you think that does for them in the West?
It gives them, it really gives them another impact perimeter shooter. Powell's had his best season in the NBA, averaged almost 20 points a game with the Raptors this year. I think 43% on three-pointers. And, he'll be a free agent this summer. He'll be able to decline. He'll decline certainly his team option. And, he can certainly be a part now of that, Blazers core.